Okay, Mike Morris, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be back with you again, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Let me begin by asking you to do some post-election analysis, even though it was like over a year ago. But I mean,
Sure.
for people who may not remember, you were the MP
Yeah.
for Kitchener Center. You were elected in 2021. You were defeated by three. I looked at the numbers, 375 votes
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
2025. Um, I mean, that's not a like people. It doesn't feel like it was a rejection of you. It just felt like things didn't go your way, or maybe like you know 376 Green voters might have thought you had it in the bag. But in terms of your post-election analysis, what happened in 2025? Why do you think you were kind of just so barely defeated in what was kind of a close election?
Yeah, it's something we've been, of course, talking a lot about as a team in even my partner and I in the weeks since, and then as a team in the months that followed. I think the short of it is, I think about what I could have done differently, and we know that it was through people power that I got elected in 2021, and we also know that in the last election, when we were able to speak with somebody at their door, and if they shared that they were planning on voting Liberal within about 5 minutes, at least half the time, when they came to understand that in Kitchener Center, it was a conservative green race and that we don't elect prime ministers in this country, but rather there's 338 or 343 now, kind of simultaneous local elections. Within about 5 minutes, that person would have switched to say, okay, wow, then I need to make sure I vote green in this election. And so, given the how close things were, it's just clear we, had hundreds and hundreds of people joining me, knocking on doors and all the rest. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. I wasn't able to inspire just that many more people. If you do the math, I'm not gonna. It gets into like how many hours off were we,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And but part of what's encouraging to me is the number of people who afterwards have said, "Oh, Mike, if only I'd known, I thought you were a shoe-in. If only I'd known, I would have donated, would have joined to knock, would have done all the rest." And so we have over the last year, we being the kind of the Kitchener Center team,
Mm.
been kind of building the energy of the group to the point now where it's almost 200 donors in Kitchener Center. It's dozens and dozens of people who've been knocking on doors. We've gotten to 3,000 more doors even just since the last election. And so all of that kind of nascent support is being increasingly brought to bear. And that to me is so exciting because every single one of those folks who might express a sense of regret or disappointment, if they can translate that emotion into something far more constructive, like making a donation, speaking with a friend, joining to knock on doors, that's how we get a different result next time. My job is to put the work in and start early enough, which is why we started in the months after the loss, to make sure that we have the people power that I know and we've seen is how Greens get elected in this country and is so much more influential than anything else in an election.
And for people who may have it slipped their mind, I mean, Kitchener Center for a period of time was a green riding provincially, federally.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So of course, learning from what you folks have done in Guelph, and the wins that Mike Schreiner has won provincially. I was elected for the first time in 2021 after coming second with 26% of the vote in 2019. Aisling Clancy was then elected in a by-election as a Green provincially. At the time, we were the only two ridings in the country, Kitchener Center and Saanich Gulf Islands, represented Green federally and provincially. Ashland was then re-elected in a landslide
Yeah,
immediately before the federal election.
yeah,
Of course, there were some elements of the context that certainly made things more difficult. And a winter election immediately after a provincial election, where a lot of the same folks have been involved, these are all elements that make the context trickier. And I am very proud that Kitchener Center was green provincially and federally. It remains green provincially and hope to return to Ottawa as a Green MP at the next opportunity.
All right, so you pretty much tagged in right away. I mean, it was for a while a minority government, so theoretically an election could happen anytime. So which is why you got organized right away.
That's right.
At what point did this become not just Mike returning as MP of Kitchener Center, but Mike wanting to lead the Green Party into the next election. How long has that been percolating?
Yeah, great question. Well, I remember the first time I was asked about leading the party was when I was in orientation days after being elected in 2021, and the party was in a leadership race at that time.
Mm.
And um, the best analogy I can give is kind of like a hockey team that, like, when you're the rookie of the team, you might need some time to develop as a player before you jump into being captain.
Right.
And so that's what I sought to do over the course of my time as an MP, was to be the best possible MP for my community. And of course, as you know, Elizabeth made clear last summer that she wouldn't be the leader heading into the next election, which gave my family and I a chance. To me, it starts here at home. It's a lot to ask of a partner. This is the kind of job where you have to like have an application fee to even apply for the job. Like this is
Right.
not a normal job. And it demands a lot of a person's family. And I've got a lot of respect, having got to know a lot of other MPs in Ottawa, particularly those who are far from pretty far-flung parts of the country and what it demands of their families, particular for younger parents and women in particular.
Right.
But yeah, it started off with having that conversation here at home. We've got a young one. We had a baby last summer. And so doing it while having a young family kind of adds another dynamic. But when I knew that my partner was supportive, it was then about going to the volunteer team and making sure that the local team was equally supportive. And yeah, those conversations, percolated over the course of the past year, but particularly once we knew that Elizabeth was not going to be the leader heading into the next one, and that the federal council would need to open a race. That gave me some time to make sure that if they did or when they did, that we were ready for it.
As you mentioned, there was a leadership uh, contest after you were
Mm.
elected and before you were elected as well. And I think this is something that political weirdos like me who like tune into these things and watch them closely is, enemy Paul, um, and whatever the dynamics that led her to not be as successful as a Green Party leader as maybe people had hoped. I do wonder how much of it is that the previous leader, as you mentioned, Elizabeth May,
Yeah.
was sitting in the House. And like this is nothing about like I don't want to get into the dynamics of interpersonal stuff, but I mean just structurally, when the old leader is in the House and the new leader
Yeah.
is not,
Yeah.
there's kind of like an optics thing. And so I'm sure you've thought about this, so I want to ask. Let's say it's November, and this may apply to Nina Durkin, who is also running for a leader too. But one of you will be leader. You will both be outside the House. Elizabeth May will still be in, regardless of her intention. So, how do you navigate that relationship? The new leader, the old leader in the House, the new leader
Yeah.
outside, and how do you manage those power
Yeah.
optics?
Well, I guess first of all, the asterisk of the caveat is save for a by-election in Kitchener Center anytime soon, which we're
Okay,
not expecting.
right,
Um, but I guess yeah, I did a kind of another one of these almost kind of ask me anythings on Reddit locally here in Waterloo Region over the last few days, and it's a question that came up on Reddit as well. I think part of it starts with the relationship that Elizabeth and I have and the experience we have working together. Um, an example is it was the protocol for the former prime minister to take questions only on Wednesdays. The current prime minister, I don't even know when he's there to take questions at all, but Trudeau would be there every Wednesday. And so typically on Wednesdays, question period is a bit different in that, and you'd probably track this closer than most, but you'd see almost exclusively the party leaders ask the questions. And the questions are apportioned based on the number of seats in the House, not on the percentage of vote, but on the seats in the House.
right,
And so as Greens, we'd have one. And it wasn't the case for us that it would be only Elizabeth. In fact, she would rotate with me back and forth. And so when I was advocating on the disability benefit, I'd get a chance to bring questions to the Prime Minister directly on electoral reform and calling out his broken promise, on housing funding and homelessness. I routinely had chances to bring these concerns to the Prime Minister directly in question period, where the vast majority of the time for the other parties, another MP would never have that opportunity.
right.
And so I really appreciated how Elizabeth was so keen to like create space for me that included how we voted. we have the same values, but we have space as Greens to think about what's in our community's best interest and what is something that where do we stand thinking about our community rather than just what the party tells us to do. Um, and I also really appreciate that she has the experience in Parliament. And, if there's a speech, because, someone's passed away and every party is going to honor that person, there's a good chance Elizabeth knew them and
Mm,
could just jump right in and give the most heartfelt speech of her personal lived experience with that person. So I actually think we stand to benefit by having such a strong parliamentarian in the House. Um, I've seen, particularly when I was an MP, we had an interim leader for a time, and I really saw her, um, speaking into her job as an MP while
mm.
not party leader at the time. And if elected leader, I know that we have that dynamic to kind of continue to build from. And we're so much stronger as a party having a parliamentarian in the House of Commons, whether that's to bring forward legislation, a petition, questions in question period. It's so important having that foothold in Parliament is so key. And it's also why, in my campaign for leader, I've been very clear. There's no like question about where I'm going to run. I will be running at Kitchener Center. Here's the team already in place in Kitchener Center. Here's the plan to win back Kitchener Center as leader. And for folks in my community, I think about you in Guelph, Adam, and I think about how much more your voice as a Guelphite is heard at Queen's Park because you've got the party leader speaking on your behalf. And that's what I hope to bring for folks in Kitchener Center and in Waterloo Region is that much more ability to speak about our issues that relate to issues across the country as party leader representing Kitchener Center as candidate and hopefully as MP again.
Well, let's talk about issues because I feel like this should be Green Party summer in a sense. Because what are people talking about? They're talking about gas prices. They're talking
Yeah.
about wildfires. They're talking about not wanting data centers.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like this, you know, there should be something going on here, and not it's not just a Green Party thing, but I think all like center left parties to an extent
Yeah.
too, like
Yeah.
should be hitting hard right now. But it seems like there's some difficulty getting the message out. So can you talk about how do you make the Green Party more, I guess, like how do you get the message out? How do you respond as these issues are and
Well,
people are looking for action on these issues?
yeah, first of all, it doesn't start with just getting the message out. It is the lived experience of folks in this country. The news this morning is 20,000 people evacuated in BC. An 80-year-old woman has died in the wildfires in BC. This is now second to 2023 for wildfire season. 3.8 million hectares are on fire right now. The climate uh, catastrophe is on our doorstep at a time when both of the two main parties are both clamoring to outbid each other on how quickly they can build new fossil fuel infrastructure that the private sector wants nothing to do with, that will sacrifice the future of our kids and our grandkids. And progressives are standing up. I'm seeing voices from Environmental Defense and the Canadian Climate Institute and others, the UN Secretary General calling out our Prime Minister. Um, Obviously, there's a needed role here for our political leaders as well. Elizabeth, of course, is continuing to speak about it, but very clear, Adam, that there is a huge opportunity for um, the political leaders in this country right now to better represent the views of the vast majority of Canadians who are wanting to see action in the midst of this crisis. And I think Greens can bring it. There is some base to build from. Looking at the Q1 fundraising numbers for the party, I think it was the best Q1 and then the best Q2 in any non-election year since 2020 or 2021, so in the last 5 years. Outsized impact as compared to the number of MPs in the House of Commons, of course, when it comes to donation amounts. In PI, Greens are polling in first right now.
Hmm,
We've got like really strong Greens like Emily Lowen in BC that
sure.
is like in terms of communications, just so encouraging to see what she's putting out there and the movement she's building up. You talked about data centers as an example and the way she's pushing back. The Greens of Ontario just came out with their call for a moratorium on data centers in Ontario, which is strongly supported by the vast majority of Ontarians. And that's Mike's work again here. And look at how well respected he is. So
Hmm.
I think it's about being honest about what we're facing. That pipeline I mentioned earlier, the simplest way to put it is a wealth transfer. It is our money from regular people being transferred to the billionaire class, specifically foreign-owned oil and gas companies that are already making money hand over fist, who are, making off like bandits by ripping us off at the pumps. Um, and it's clear that there's a need for that very clear-headed, honest assessment of where we're at without the partisan theater
Mm,
in the interest of actually bringing forward solutions. We should be talking about building up the renewable energy generation in this country while strengthening provincial interties to strengthen and clean up the electricity grid rather than the backsliding happening in Ontario as they're talking about adding more natural gas. We should be investing in year-round forest fire prevention and management service that we don't already have in this country. And we should be making the connections between all the rest that we can be doing that mitigates the climate crisis, including public transit, including having young people engaged in renovations of buildings across this country en masse. Um, it's a really important time for us to be having these conversations while recognizing the grief that so many face while we are in the midst of this wildfire season right now, that only makes the affordability crisis worse.
mm.
And we've got real solutions to put forward that this government is turning a blind eye to.
I want to talk about partisan infighting in a sec, but I want to talk about momentum before that because I was thinking about this over the weekend. I was sort of getting into the version of journalism I do, let's call it, around 2006, and that's when Elizabeth May came up as leader, and it felt like there was real momentum to the Green Party. It was really coming into its own. She was going to get elected. She would get the foothold, and then we'd get like a real Green Party caucus, and that didn't so much happen. But there was that momentum felt real. I mean, even here in Guelph, the candidate at the time, Mike Nagy, I believe that if that election had been a by-election and not a full-blown general election, he probably would have won, and he would have been the first Green MP. But I feel like the passion and enthusiasm behind the Green Party comes in waves. So, yes, there's a momentum behind you, or perhaps Nina if she wins. People are eager to see climate action. But I mean, how do you not lose that momentum? It seems like the trend it goes back to pragmatism eventually.
Well, it's about having a political party can be a vehicle for significant change. And as you have put forward, Greens can be that vehicle if we are able to stay focused on connecting to improving the lives of everyday Canadians and doing it in solidarity with the organizations on the front lines of doing this work who continue to be there, and also other political parties with whom we share a common cause. And if I look around the world right now, I think about in the UK and some of the progress that Greens in the UK are making, huge strides, winning by-elections, exponential growth in the membership under the leadership of Zach Polanski. I look at Greens in New Zealand, but I also look at provincial Greens here in Canada and the waves that they are making, all in service of improving the lives of the folks that they are representing. And Canada's federal Green Party can step into that at a time when, like, let's be honest here, 86 billionaires in this country have as much wealth as more than the bottom 6 million Canadians combined.
Mm. Hmm.
So,
For
like, no wonder we're all feeling the squeeze. We're a wealthy nation, but that wealth is consolidated, and political leaders in this country have encouraged for that wealth to be concentrated amongst a tiny, tiny subset of people in this country. And that needs to change. We need to bring about a better sense of fairness that at the same time can also ensure that we then invest in the needed housing, climate solutions, healthcare, childcare that we need.
But it feels like the Pawn Stars meme, right? Where it's like we want clean, fair, more just future. Best I can do is, keeping things exactly how they are.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so that means we need to have conversations in this country about, for example, why is it that there's no inheritance tax? And we're
Mm.
the only G7 country where, when one of those 86 billionaires passes on, that the only taxation done is this deemed disposition where it's assumed, that just the capital gains are paid, but the rest of the assets aren't.
Right.
Why is that the case? Doesn't make any sense. You talk about capital flight, where we're the only one in the G7 who doesn't have it already. And so we need to be introducing progressive solutions. Why is it that there's, the highest income tax bracket in this country is, 250 some odd thousand. And groups like Canadians for Tax Fairness and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives have long called for additional tax brackets, say at 1 million and higher. Um, these are ways that we should be more fairly taxing the extreme wealth concentration. And Adam, while we don't do it between 2024 and 2025, that extreme wealth increased by 20%.
Mm.
How many of your friends and neighbors saw their wealth increase by 20%? How many of your friends and neighbors saw their salary go up 20%? What I'm seeing is the exact opposite. I'm seeing friends of mine who are nurses and electricians whose inflation, like their wages aren't even keeping up with inflation, while we're allowing for the wealth of that tiny, tiny 0.1% of the population to just explode. Um, we need to have more honest conversations about who we're really up against here in this country.
Mm.
And it's us against the billionaire class and the political leaders who enable them to continue um, to just dominate the wealth of this country at the expense of everyone else.
I would I would agree with that, and I would add though that Mark Carney probably hasn't been hurting as much as he should be. I think a lot of people would you talk to
Well,
any
he's a
crowd and
Goldman
whatnot.
Sachs banker.
I mean, of
He's,
course, but
he's,
of course, and we're having a meeting at City Council the night after next as we're recording about cutting development charges and another effort. They're giving us money for infrastructure if we cut development charges,
yeah,
and but that's not the change people want. And again, Mark Carney's poll numbers, like, they fluctuate a little, but I mean, and that may be because the natural enemy of the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, isn't making any gains either. We just saw another Conservative MP quit last week. And it seems like
yeah.
there's a void. And I don't know if people are waiting for another election or they're on autopilot because the news is so bad, but I mean, there has to be an activation in some sense that people have
Yes.
to see your words and the words of other green candidates of other parties who want to make this kind of change you're speaking about. How do you do that outside of the frame of the election, and how do you get people to tune back in when all they want to do is drop out?
Well, it starts with having this conversation here. It starts with the leadership race that I'm in the midst of right now. At this point, I have yet to secure a mandate from members, and Nira is in the midst of looking to do the same. And so we've got until November 2nd when voting starts, and then the vote itself will conclude on November 14th. This is a time for us to be getting the message out in terms of what Greens can offer and how we can stand up at a time when, if the major foil for the Liberals is the Conservatives, at a time when they share so many of the same policies, they even share MPs at this point. There seems to me like there's a bit of a gap there for some progressives to say we can offer something different. Um, and we're not the only ones. I'm seeing the NDP come forward with a new leader as well. And I'm actually encouraged by that. because it means there's that many more political leaders in this country who are going to call out how similar those two parties are right now as the current governing party moves further and further to the right, and how Canadians deserve better options, even if we're stuck with divisive winner take all first past the post. We
Mm,
deserve better. Um, You'll see in the platform I'm putting forward, I've made clear that under my leadership, if elected as leader of the Greens, and if we ever have the balance of power again, which has happened numerous times federally and provincially in this country, that proportional representation will be the sole demand that we put forward in exchange for our support so that Canadians are better represented. But until then, I think you're right. There's huge space here. And it starts with the leadership race we're in the midst of right now. I'm looking forward to how we can build this party. And we've got a lot of work to do. We were chatting before we started the conversation about bilingualism and
hmm
engaging in Quebec. We need to make sure that we're doing that well. In my view, Greens win when strong community leaders like Mike Schreiner and Ashlyn Clancy and Matt McFarland um, are the ones who put themselves forward to seek elected office. And so we need to bring forward a message that's going to resonate not just for the broad population, but for individual community leaders to consider putting themselves forward. I think about Guelph, for example, and winning the privilege to represent folks in Guelph as the member of parliament and as a Green starts with having someone like you mentioned, Mike, before, but a
hmm
well-established, um, respected community leader who says, I actually want to do this. I share values with Greens, but I'm here to speak on behalf of Guelph at a time when we need strong progressive voices to offer alternatives. That's a big part of this as well, is making sure there is that slate of candidates who will put themselves forward at a time when their voices are needed across the country too.
I wanted to get to this, and I didn't want to leave it out before we run out of time. But I mean, you did mention the NDP and Avi
Mhm.
Lewis, their new leader. They're in a rebuilding season too, and they're trying to tack to the left as critical of the, let's call it the dyad. But I will
Yeah,
say, and I think you will agree, it's not always been cordial between Green supporters and
yeah,
NDP supporters.
for sure.
So, you're chasing the same votes, and I think we've seen this in electoral politics in Ontario as well. Um, yeah, if there's a little more cooperation, Doug Ford gets defeated because he 35 to 39% of the
Yeah.
votes. So, I mean, is there a path where if you're leader of the Green Party and if Avi Lewis is open, that there's some kind of cooperation between the two parties to form kind of like a left coalition?
Yeah.
If it means, presenting or having a shot at presenting more left wing or progressive ideas or holding, even if it just means holding that balance of power.
Yeah, that's such an important question, Adam. To me, it starts with what I've said a few times in this conversation, is viewing a political party as not the end, but a means to the end. My goal here is not to plant the Green Party flag in certain issues to the exaltation of the Green Party. This is about Greens being a vehicle to achieve a movement that we can help build alongside others to confront the billionaire class. And so that's why what I can commit to, what I have committed to, and folks can find more at mikeforleader.ca. My commitment is to good faith negotiations and conversations with other political parties with whom we share common cause. I would include the NDP in that group with a view towards electoral cooperation of some kind. I can't commit to an end result because that requires another party to be in that discussion with.
Of course.
But what I can do right now, though, is seek that mandate from Greens and encourage others to join the party right now. If that is exciting to you, this is a wonderful time to join the party, be a part of this leadership race. The stronger of a mandate we achieve in this race, more fulsomely, I could approach others to say, I've got this kind of a mandate from Greens to engage in a conversation around electoral cooperation, because what we want to see as Canadians is a united front of progressives offering options and holding the government to account and bringing forward solutions on behalf of the communities we represent. And I'm excited about Greens being a part of that. I can appreciate why in years past, under first past the post, the system is designed to pit parties against each other. The more similar they are, which is a way to say the more they hold in common, the more parties are often pitted against each other. And that's disappointing because it doesn't actually help us achieve our goals.
Mm.
And so this is what I'm putting forward as a commitment. And I think it's important you're asking questions like that because it's something I think we should be talking about. And like I said, folks can find more at mikeforleader.ca or mikepolchef.ca.
All right. Well, like you said, this is the beginning. So we will leave it here for now.
But Adam,
Uh,
it's sure nice
yes.
as we kick things off to be back with you again. My hope is that, of course, we'll be doing, these kinds of conversations with folks right across the country. But it's sure been nice to be connecting with folks like yourself that, in terms of a kind of a launching point, I'm so glad you reached out. It's good to chat again. I think the kind of nuanced conversation that we always have is what we need more of in this country. So yeah, just really appreciate what you're doing. And I'm glad you reached out.
Well, I guess I'll have to cook up some more biting questions for next time then. But
Hey,
Mike,
the campaign is a few months, so I
all
hope you'll reach
right.
back out.
All right. Well, Mike Morris, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet, and yours too.